All right, it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We're reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our conversation this morning, as we earlier indicated, is on the challenges with the ECOWAS protocol on free movement and the attendant security issues. To set the tone for that discussion, let's listen into this background by our correspondent, Oyemi Ajayi.
Economic Community of West African States, established on 28 May 1975, with the signing of the Treaty of Lagos, aimed to promote economic integration across the region. The stated goal of ECOWAS is to achieve collective self-sufficiency for its member states by creating a single large trade bloc and building a full economic and trading union. Since its establishment, member countries have been relating with this target, with encouragement of all member states opening their borders freely for members without visa towards the promotion of free movement of goods and services, all to support intra-Africa trade. Despite this promising prospect, the result has been a win-lose situation. The ECOWAS protocol, which encourages free movement, has also raised security concerns as bandits and terrorists easily migrate from country to country in the sub-region to perpetrate nefarious acts under the guise of the protocol. Also, some experts believe that the Free Movement Protocol appears to have encouraged drug and human trafficking more than it encouraged commerce. Some also argue that the domestic policies in some member states tend to contradict the Free Movement Protocol, such as the case of Ghana, where there are harsh criteria for foreigners who wish to trade in Ghana, a trend which has its own way of discouraging influx into that country. Many have echoed the need for reform of the ECOWAS protocol on free movement, as it's said to need proper definition, especially in view of emerging trends, in order to be beneficial to member states and not at the detriment of a few. What pattern should the reform take that will be beneficial to all? How can the security challenges that come with free movement of people in the sub-region be addressed? These are some questions that will engage guests on the program shortly.
Indeed, we have a panel of guests here who, talk more on that, and I would like to introduce here in the studio Ambassador Daud Nladi, former Nigerian High Commissioner to Pakistan. A regular, you're welcome to
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigeria.
We also have in the studio Dr. Zakari Momo Ismail. He's a public affairs analyst, lecturer, Bayes University, Department of International Relations and Diplomacy. You're welcome to Good Morning, Nigeria.
Thank you.
All right. Also here with us in the studios, another regular face on Good Morning Nigeria, Dr. Ken Okoha. This is President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. Dr. Okoha, delighted to have you this morning.
Thank you very much, Kinsley, and thank you, Nigerians.
Okay, and also joining us via Zoom from the United Kingdom, would like to welcome a public affairs analyst and international affairs expert, Paul Ejime. Paul, pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you very much, Kinsley, and my sister there. Very good morning, Nigeria.
All right, so gentlemen, let's begin the conversation this way, from the background, of course, of what we all know, the intentions of the progenitors of ECOWAS. The intentions were very clear, the intentions were noble. ECOWAS came into being in 1975, and the protocol on free movement, 40 years next month. But at the time the protocol on free movement came, West Africa was, to a considerable extent, a safe, secure, and sane environment. We didn't used to hear about terrorists, we didn't hear about fundamentalists or human traffickers, but down the line, we are having all kinds of stories and tales about the trafficking in persons, trafficking in illicit weapons, plus, of course, the daily atrocities of terrorists and bandits and kidnappers. This has now triggered the calls for reforms of that protocol, plus the fact that some ECOWAS countries are said not to have been fully in support of the deeper implications of the Protocol on Free Movement, such as we have seen, for instance, with Nigerian traders in Ghana. But let's begin, since we have the experts in here, some who have worked previously in the public service with their background in terms of either the services, that's to say the army, or the defense services, plus, of course, aspects of diplomacy. Ambassador Danladi, of course, we've had you on Good Morning Nigeria on a number of occasions. Straight to the point, the ECOWAS Protocol on Free Movement, is it still desirable or is it in need of urgent reform? And if so, why?
Thank you very much. I think there would be the need quickly to look at possibly a quick gains of the ECOWAS protocol, free movement. In a nutshell, it has put the ECOWAS region in a vintage position because the last check, the trading volume has hit about $200 billion US, which puts the region in a vintage position to negotiate favorable trade deals with World Trade Organizations, with other international organizations. But let me quickly say this, that the ECOWAS heads of government recognizes the danger posed as a result of the Protocol on Free Movement. It has been hijacked, as has been said by the reports, by transnational criminal armed dealers, human traffickers, and of course, drug cartels, which presently is constituting a lot of insecurity to the country. But in recognition of that, they came out with another protocol, a moratorium in the 90s, and of course the 2002 Bamako Declaration, which clearly spells out the code of conduct and the plan of action that member states should observe in order to mitigate the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And if you look at the guidelines that was spelled out in this code of conduct and plan of action, basically a national commission was supposed to be set up, which will coordinate, monitor, and report back to the executive secretary of ECOWAS, who in turn will brief the head of state government on challenges being faced. There's also the requirement to set up databases in all the member state countries that will capture movement and shipment of arms into the region. There was supposed to be an administrative mechanism that would enhance exchange of information and at the same time map out programs of training, effective border control and surveillances to the security forces within the region. Again, there was the requirement to set up a regional register. And that register was to also capture local production of small arms. And let me just say this quickly, that it is not that the heads of states have not thought out strategies to deal with this problem, but it is the implementation, poor implementation of the plan of action. If you look into that document, there was supposed to be the culture of promotion of culture of peace in the region. Similarly, issues of funding, because when you are dealing with transnational arms dealers or arms dealers, manufacturers, it's about over $90 billion industry. And these armed cartels, they have the financial muscle. At times they do even influence policies within this country. The circumvention of some of this and the lack of legal binding agreements to the protocol has been the loopholes for some of these security challenges. So, in a nutshell, there is the need to review the protocol to control small arms in the region. The need for member states to honor their obligations in funding ECOWAS. The need to also harmonize legal legislation, including appropriate sanctions for erring countries. For example, local production in Ghana, 100,000 guns are produced annually in Ghana. Where are they being sold to? If you take 5-year calculations, you are looking at 500,000 guns that are produced. If we don't have a register, a regional register, we don't have linkages, information, it's very difficult for these guns to be traced. Again, there are a lot of other factors that have contributed in undermining the moratorium on the control of the small arms. Corruption is one of them, whereby on a token, goods are being shipped across the borders. If you don't have strong border controls, then of course, all sorts of things will pass through the borders. The other issue is the end user certificate, the abuse of end user certificates. In the clause of the exemption, ECOWAS, countries were supposed to seek and get approval from the ECOWAS in order to procure arms. But unfortunately, there are some countries in the recent past, that do grant exemption certificates to non-state actors to buy and procure arms and to ship these arms to conflict zones to support proxy wars. And there are no sanctions imposed on member states. So these are some of the issues that I think going forward, perhaps there will be the need in the very near future for member states to take a review. ECOWAS should play the role it's supposed to play in ensuring that the protocol, the moratorium, are implemented to the latter.
Ambassador Ladi, you've really painted a very, scary picture of what is happening in the West African region. Now, let me come to Ben Okoa. The protocol has been there from 1979 to 2021 now. It has also been instrumental, apart from the insecurity in the zone, which has been the protocol has been instrumental in fostering regional integration and development. Are we looking at a holistic reform in the protocol, or just some gray areas that needs to be addressed?
Thank you very much. Perhaps my way of responding to this could be to take a look at the historical perspectives of the protocol itself. First, it might be important to start with the establishment of ECOWAS in 1975, and then what led to it. And we must understand and underscore this particular point, that it was economic integration that led to the formation of ECOWAS. It wasn't the political side. And therefore, in 1979, the very first protocol that came into place after the formation of ECOWAS in 1975 was the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, which is the ETLS, that bonded the entire 15 member countries together in terms of movement of goods, persons, services. And that was extended little later to movement of capital. And I'm going to, the reason why I'm placing this is to trace what has happened till date. And now, after the 1979 protocol on free movement, what happened? People started seeing that there were some infractions that were still going around the whole of West Africa. And in 1985, there was a review of that protocol. In 1986, again, there was another review that came into place. Why? Because of the issue of small arms and light weapons that came into being. And that also propagated the convention on small arms and light weapons, which became a separate, law, a separate rule entirely on itself. But again, as they moved on, they also saw issues like drug coming up, taking the space. And then in 1989, the protocol was reviewed again to inculcate all of this. But then in 1990, there was a comprehensive review. that brought us to where we are now. Now, having taken a look at this, do we need a review at this point? The answer could stem from what has happened between 1990 and now. In 1990, the region was very peaceful. We never had, except for Liberia war, Sierra Leone war, and all of that, we never had issues. But something happened again that along the, what they call it, Konadunga and Kailamun axis of Sierra Leone, there was a pilage of arms that were discovered. And these arms were moving towards, from that direction, just like what Ambassador was saying, towards Ghana. And then people asked, Ghana is peaceful. Why are these weapons heading to that end? And it became so notorious that it looked like a conduit pipe for all of these. And added to it is what the statement that the ambassador made about local manufacturing. Ghana is the highest local manufacturer of arms in the West African region and is most peaceful. Where are these weapons headed to?
Who buys them?
Who buys them? Again, if we look away from West Africa a bit, take a look at Central Africa, which borders West Africa. You have the Gulf of Guinea, Cameroon, and then you look at Gabon and all of that, and then towards our own Calabar. A lot of arms are moving on. However, the protocol on free movement does not cover that end because they are not in the same region with us. The question is, has anybody taken time to look at a kind of a regional interface between the two economic communities, CEMAC on one end, which covers the Gulf of Guinea, and then ECOWAS? The answer is no. I am therefore thinking that what we need to do is to look at what has happened between 1990, which was the last review of ECOWAS Protocol on Free Movement, and now, in terms of within intra-trade and extra-trade, which is of the Gulf of Guinea side. However, I think there are a lot of opportunities that have presented themselves for a country like Nigeria to trigger, and raise a flag for reviews. And I want to mention some of these opportunities, if you don't mind. Number one, when we started having transhumans, the movement of cattle from off West Africa and from countries in West Africa coming into there, and transhumans were not covered within the ambit of the protocol, what should we have done? The government ought to have raised the flag and said, this is not part of what we agreed upon. And until we started having the infractions between the herders and the farmers, to this moment, nobody has come to say, look. And people were talking, people in government, I listened, that I heard, that the ones committing these crimes are not from Nigeria. They are from outside the country. And therefore, what should we do as a counter, as a government? I never saw that. Number two is that we have a common external tariff which binds third country trade with West Africa, which regulates that. And that was to expire by 2020, the experimentation period of 5 years. It was adopted in 2015 and implemented until, for 5 years, which is 2020. Now, while we are moving towards 2020, I thought that it was an opportunity for Nigeria to say, oh, hey guys, let's come to the round table again and see how this has worked. What are the issues? What are the challenges? Where are the gaps? How do we now begin to fill up all the gaps I never saw that. I have not seen it. The third one is the ECOWAS Trade Liberation Scheme. I have had an opportunity, a privilege of serving with the 7-man task force set up by the ECOWAS heads of states. And we have traveled all throughout the borders. There is no border in the whole of West Africa that I have not traveled to. And I've seen, quite a lot horrendous crimes committed at the borders. And there are also, human beings who are supposed to be wearing uniforms paid for by government money. And sometimes you see that people are looking the other way and things are happening. I can tell you this, and just for free, we have a lot in our hands. Drugs coming in all in the name of the Protocol on Free Movement. Huge pilage of arms coming in all in the name of free movement protocols. Trafficking in human beings. Human parts now, another one. That is an additional worry. And I think that, perhaps the last point would be to look at an opportunity again that presented itself, where Nigeria ought to have stood up, is this infraction that has continued to reign between Nigerian traders and Ghanaian authorities. I thought Nigeria would have said, no, guys, come, let's sit down. Can we review this? Since this is not working, since we have signed this and yet there is another country that is implementing an entirely different position outside the protocol, can we sit down? I have not seen that happen.
Did you raise it with the...
Oh, yes, many times. Many times.
What was the response?
And of course, we have also discussed this, even at the task force level, with the heads of states. And each time you bring this, I'm sorry to say this, that it appears that sometimes you look at the authority of heads of states as if there is a tea party, I don't know, but...
A gentleman's club. All right, Dr.
Yeah,
Kenuka.
ladies now,
We're a gentleman's club, it's, sorry, I'm using it generically. Dr. Kenuka, thank you very much there for your opening comments. Let's go over to the UK, where we are introduce Paul Ejime, who is with us via Zoom. Yes, we know that the protocol on free movement is quite elaborate because it involves right of residency, right of establishment of business and trade and all of that. But it is the security implication that is our primary focus this morning. Perhaps I should back up a bit and just remind us what happened last week when we were discussing how to mop up in our country the avalanche of illicit small arms and light weapons. And we had the First Public Relations Officer, Commissioner of Police, Frank Uba, with us. And he narrated some of the raids that the Nigerian police has undertaken in recent times. And quite clearly, he also drew attention to the fact that the protocol on free movement was, as it were, a hindrance to effective policing in Nigeria. And there appears to be, in his view, little cooperation that we are getting from other West African countries. Ambassador Danladi here was talking about setting up commissions and having a register with regard to illicit weapons. I was just wondering, Paul, I hardly ever hear stories or read stories from elsewhere in West Africa about seizures of illicit arms and light weapons. And Nigeria appears to be the ultimate destination, which is why stories these days from persons who have been freed from the hands of kidnappers, little children wielding AK-47, AK-49, and other kinds of assault weapons. And you know what's going on in Zamfara, the entire northwest, and indeed elsewhere in the country. So this is the background for our focus on the protocol of free movement, whether there is indeed a need now for urgent reform so as to save us as a country from the from the atrocities of individuals, transnational criminals, who are taking advantage on the Protocol on Free Movement. Paul, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Kingsley. And let me build on what Ambassador has said, and then my brother Ken. You know, a document, constitution, or protocol is as good as its implementation or lack of it. And that is what is happening. Yes, there is need for perhaps a more comprehensive review. But has it been tried? Because what is happening is that very soon people rush to say, change. But you will agree from what has been said that there have been some tinkering with it. ECOWAS Treaty, 1975, there was review of that treaty, 1993. And with all the things that, as you go along, you notice certain things that are not working. That is why you either have supplementary protocol or amendments. That is allowed in law and then international relations. But my problem is that it has not been tried. What is happening is that, you blame the paper, you blame the protocol. What about the state and non-state actors? So I want to look at it from both the micro and macro level. At the micro, what are the countries doing? Because Nigeria cannot outsource its own what it should do and blame the fact that ECOWAS member states are not doing what they are supposed to do. How is Nigeria protecting itself on that, using that protocol before you now move outside your border? Of course, what happens outside your border is of interest, but what have you done as a nation? And the other countries, what have they done? So they have signed up to it, like any other one they have signed up to. What I have noticed is the lip service. They will agree to do all, but they never do it. So there is what I call the incapacity or inefficiency of or lack of political will by these countries to implement what I have signed up to. Then you also have insincerity, in the implementation, and then of course what you call the external factors. What are the external factors or efforts to destabilize what ECOWAS was built to represent? A borderless community where the citizens will be free to pursue their economic interests, so that for the progress and prosperity of the community. But what has happened? This has not, so you wouldn't blame the founding fathers. Remember that when they even came out, Nigeria had just come out of the civil war. So somebody was saying, well, it was the security issue was not as, yes, perhaps it's not to this magnitude. Pushed their ministers, Professor Adedeji, and then what is name? Who died recently? The foreign minister. They moved and got this thing working. But is ECOWAS itself working? That is the issue. This is just, if ECOWAS is not working, how do you expect the protocols to work? That is the issue. That the member states are paying lip service to what they have signed up to, and until they come with that sincerity, they go back to the ideals of the founding fathers. The objective. Why was ECOWAS set up? My brother here has mentioned, well, it was an economic thing, yes, but you remember that for 2 decades or more, security issue. Was the order of the day, and both go hand in hand. If you don't have security, you cannot have economic development. So that you cannot fault them. So they were trying to quench those fires before they move into economic issues. So now we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. He has talked about the ETSL, the Economic ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme. This cannot work until and unless the member states become serious about what is happening. Let me also tell you that there are forces working to destabilize the region that we cannot, and so the arms movement that we talk about from during the wars, the civil wars in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and then now Libya has become a failed state. And then you see the consequence. Look at Chad. Chad is now a neighbor to Nigeria. You see what the president was killed. And now you very soon you'll be seeing some, Chad is not a member of ECOWAS, but it belongs to the Central African Economic Community. But you see people that are displaced, they will soon be moving to Nigeria, where they will think that perhaps what they have, they are looking for peace, running for their own life, and so on and so forth. So what are the states doing? You can't continue to blame the protocol. Have you made it to work? Recently, remember, Nigeria had to close its borders and hell was let loose. People were saying, why should Nigeria do that? That it was against the ECOWAS protocol and so on and so forth. But Nigeria had to take that unilateral action to protect its economic and security interests. And so, I'm not saying that countries should go unilateral. But that is what happens when you have not done what you are supposed to do as a community. It is not working. They are paying lip service either from incapacity, from inefficiency, from a lack of political will or insincerity, and then coupled with what I have mentioned as external forces that are not working for instance, have you seen how these things work? It's not only in Nigeria. You call it free movement. But let ordinary Nigerians tell you what they face, or citizens, what they face across the borders. You bring your passport, they will tell you it is virgin passport, that before they disvirgin it, as it were, you had to pay money. Corruption, he mentioned it. You move from one, then you have roadblocks across in Nigerian side. Let me say Nigeria, but it's also across. These are all antithetics. They are hindrances to the implementation of that protocol. So part of it is that it has not been allowed to work. And then we are talking about reform. So what kind of reform will you bring that will make the member states see it fit to not only protect their own borders and then join others in partnership to do what the ECOWAS founding fathers set it up to do, to have a borderless, in fact, of all the regional economic communities, ECOWAS is the one that is holding up the light. ECAS and the others are not, and part of it was this flagship protocol of free movement. It was the first African region to get to that allows you to stay 90 days. And then before you begin to ask questions, the issue is after staying that 90 days, what are the states, doing to enforce? So it's about enforcement and the implementation. You don't blame the protocol. Have you checked what is the data you have about those who have entered your country? You should follow it up. For instance, in UK here, once you enter, it's entered in your data, in your passport. They print the computer and it shows when you entered. How are they able to locate those who have overstayed and take action against them? Has the ECOWAS member states done something like that? They are not doing it. Who is to blame? Are you blaming those who have entered? Are you blaming another country for that? Or because of your own inefficiency and incompetence? So that is what is happening. Let the state actors and do their job and monitor. You cannot, when somebody overstays and you pick him up and you send him away, you have not broken the protocol. You have obeyed the protocol. But you won't say, when Nigeria closed the borders, yes, it did that. And people were, shouting. And then look at, my brother also mentioned these constant problems of traders. We are itinerant people. Much of the trade that we are doing is informal. The Nigerian traders, the woman who is trying to make ends meet, that is where the economy lies. And so you have to look in. That was why the founding fathers deemed it fit to say, please do not become an encumbrance to how these people can fend for themselves. That was the whole idea. But the people, these current leaders of ECOWAS, they are not living up to the objective, the mission statement of the founding father. That should worry everybody, not just on free movement, on everything that ECOWAS represents. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for your opening comments there. You've really, really raised some pertinent questions. Now let's come back to the studio. Dr. Zakari Momo, as a student of international relations and diplomacy and a public analyst, Paul Ejimi has raised some issues that needs to be looked into. You know, the protocol itself is for integration, development, and business, marketing, and all that. But Nigeria has become a dumping ground for every other thing: drugs, used clothes, food, you know, arms and everything. But are we looking at it from the perspective that we need to review the protocol itself or reform it? And is our big brother status sort of negatively impacting on our country?
Thank you very much. I think we need to look at it from this point of view. Integration generally is a gradual process. We cannot deny the fact that when the founding fathers, or the first generation that took independence from the colonial masters, when they have this vision, of course, they meant well for the region. A situation where during the colonialism, our economy was totally tied with our erstwhile colonial masters. And they have this vision that, well, it will not continue like this. We cannot just get flag independence from the colonial masters. Why economically we cannot feed ourselves? Why economically we are still tied with them? And what that means is that there is now need for West African countries to be independent economically. And the best way to handle that is to have this regional borderless protocol that could assist member states to transact economically within themselves and have the maximum utilization of opportunities that is therein. Therefore, we should look at it from this point that this is a very good policy that was initiated that time and is still in place now. I think what we'll need to know is that all this is part of development. Whether you call it negative or positive. Of course, we have negative development, which we have seen the proliferation of arms, trafficking in human person, money laundering, and all other transborder crime that has characterized the policy of pre-border movement as we have it today. Yes, it is not unexpected. We cannot blame them like others have said. It is now left for the current generation of leaders to take a holistic look at it and review it. Well, it has been reviewed over time, but there is still need for us to go back to the drawing board and have proper implementation. Like everybody has says here, it is not the policy in itself, it is the implementation that matters. Many of these West African countries pay lip services to the implementation of this protocol. We must say that it is good at this time that media has made it a point of debate. Let's look at it. Let's generate an opinion here so that Nigeria has been a leader in ECOWAS. And Nigeria should take a lead in having this protocol properly implemented, especially with its own attendance vices that comes with it now. We cannot deny the fact that when you have issues of this nature, while you are looking at the economic aspect of it, while you are looking at having a better future for the region, there are also people on the net that are also planning the other way to forestall and keep in check the crime that also they usually conduct. It is not only in ECOWAS. It goes round. Of course, the people of Undernet, that is where they make their money. It is like Ambassador has said, it is a multi-billion business that they strive. In fact, in some time, they even topple government. We have seen that many a times. But the point is that government has to strengthen its security apparatus. Let us have these security people trained very well and be committed and be committed to their job. A situation where we said we have a borderless situation, but we still have document. People goes to this border with fake document, and the people that are there that are supposed to man this border and ensure that while you are crossing to the other country, you are crossing on a proper ground, having a proper document, going for a legal business. They look the other way. They compromise. What did you expect? That is why you see that these arms are very hardly to control, because people that are supposed to check and do their work judiciously, they have compromised. The effect, the consequence will definitely be upon this country. What I am saying is that Nigeria at this point in time should be called to take a lead in reviewing this protocol, strengthen the security apparatus, having this protocol implemented the way it is. It has also often been said that it is not the laws, it is not the policies that establish some of this protocol that is effective, but it is the implementation that matters. A situation where the arms that are being, passing from one country to the other have no documentation. They have people that were not licensed, were trading in this because it's a multi-billion business. Overnight, somebody can become rich, and that is why you see that it resorted to so many things that, if not properly checked now, it can cause trouble. Somebody has just mentioned Chad. Chad is not a member of ECOWAS, but we know that if Nigeria did not take a leadership position, what is happening in Chad now, Nigeria will have the consequence of it. And it is better we discuss it at this time so that we can review it. Thank God we have in government today a very, very diplomatic person, a well-respected in person of Professor Gambari, who has been an international repute in terms of diplomacy, and he's with government now. We have people that can actually come, look at this policy, review it properly, and have it implemented in a way that what was originally set up to be of advantage to this member country will not suffer the consequence as we are seeing it today. And the time is now. I think every hand should be on deck now so that the government, the policymakers, and the citizen should be, even though crime and criminality has always been part of the society, while you are thinking and you are progressing in a country, there are other people that are also planning the other way. So, and it is the responsibility of the government, a functional government for that matter, to think ahead and nip all this crime in bud so that the consequence of it will be controlled at the appropriate time, especially now that we are seeing the influx of arms, and is a serious challenge to particularly Nigeria and some other West African countries.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Zachary Ismaila. We will return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's bring in again Ambassador Dauda Danladi. Ambassador Danladi, what the consensus appears to be from you guys is that, yes, ECOWAS treaty was an ideal. Yes, the protocols are also ideals, but we are having major issues with the implementation of the provisions of the protocol and even aspects of the treaty. I was just wondering, I mean, when you listen to Paul Ejime and even your good self and Ken Okoha and Zachary, there are challenges all around. You couldn't possibly have member countries being, as it were, tepid in enforcing the articles of a protocol, which then raises the question, what should be a national responsibility for an entity that is a member state of ECOWAS And it's that same entity is now bearing the brunt of the tepid implementation of the articles of the protocol, say, for instance, on free movement. In the case of Nigeria, we're talking about security. We're seeing the influx of arms. We're seeing the influx of drugs. All the tramadol that comes into the country, not all of them comes, not all the drugs come in through our regular ports. They come in through neighboring countries. When the borders were closed, we also saw what happened as to how people were smuggling rice, through the borders, the same way that they also smuggle these arms using motorbikes and all kinds of things. But a nation must have its own responsibility to itself and to its citizens when it feels that its neighbors who are members of an entity are not acting up to their, or living up to their responsibility.
Yeah, I think you have made a very good observations, and I think it still boils down to the issue of implementation of the protocols. Because the free movement protocol, there is a caveat there. Member states were required to ensure that their citizens have valid travel documents before moving to any member state. Secondly, border controls, strong border controls are supposed to be put in place by member states. Capacity building, training are supposed to be provided. If you recall, in the recent past, we used to have border patrol aircrafts run by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. At the end of the day, I think those aircrafts were grounded, and I think on the last inquiry is that these aircrafts were now taken over by the Nigerian Air Force. They were able to configure them and deploy them for the Northeast operations. How do you patrol porous borders? The ECOWAS moratorium on the control and mitigation was to have a joint, strong border control, including surveillances. You cannot carry out surveillances without the required equipment, without the required logistics. So again, it boils down to the issue of funding. And that is why the United Nations decided to set up a support assistance unit to assist ECOWAS in implementing some of these guidelines. We do not need to reinvent new guidelines. The guidelines are already there. You cannot review what has not been implemented. So it boils down to commitment of member states. Their financial obligations must be met. The parliamentarians, or there is a collaboration, parliamentary collaboration within the ECOWAS region. They should assist also in fast-tracking the harmonization of the required laws, sanctions. If Nigeria closes her border and it impacted on the economics of other countries, that could be an instrument to mitigate and to bring an errant state to order. But in the absence of legal binding instruments, this problem will persist. Political undertakings are only political, and they do not compel member states to cooperate. Now, if I may just quickly, a little bit digress to the issue of drug trafficking. It has become a menace now in Nigeria. Right now here in Abuja, you can easily obtain all kinds of drugs on the streets of Abuja. Our pharmaceutical pharmacies are selling prescription drugs over the counter. A lot of our youth, about 70% of our youth, are involved in this drug addiction. The NDLE does not have the capacity to provide rehabilitation. There are no rehabilitation centers. Where there are private rehabilitation centers, and they're expensive. They are beyond the reach of the common man. So thank God that now we have a robust General Marwa, who has taken over the NDLE. And I think if he is given the necessary support, perhaps it will bring a new face. Because the small arms usage is contingent upon the inducement of drugs by our youth. there is no way the escalation of banditry, kidnappings, most of the times are carried out under the influence of drugs. Boko Haram ISWAPs, whenever our militaries are able to clear particular camp of Boko Harams, all kind of drugs are found in those places. So if you can mitigate, if you can control drugs, then perhaps it will impact positively on the usage of small arms and light weapons. But it is a known fact that there are 1,100, over 1,000 countries, manufacturers spread across 98 countries that are producing arms. And there are about over 600 million small arms in circulation globally. 70% of that is in Africa. Within the moratorium, there is the strategy to reach out to civil society organizations, international organizations that are involved in combating the illicit trafficking in arms. There is the outreach program, which if implemented, ECOWAS is supposed to be in touch with arm manufacturers, to have dialogues with them, to ensure that shipment of arms do not take place unless approved by ECOWAS as enshrined. So the whole thing boils down to the implementation of the code of conduct and the action plan.
What is happening? I know Jim touched on this to say that there are forces outside of the ECOWAS sub-region that do not wish, as it were, ECOWAS well. But why would it be that ECOWAS itself has been hobbled by the crisis in the region, and yet there appears to be an unwillingness or a lack of capacity to act positively? Gentlemen, I want you to consider this while we go on this short break. When we return, we'll take your views on it. All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on NTA's network service. Just before we went on that short break, I had, of course, teased our guest with a question. So, Dr. Kenukoa, let's get your perspective on this. I mean, one of the ways to probably illustrate this in terms of what we are seeing in Nigeria, an arms dealer can move from any country in West Africa, and apparently, because the policing system is weak across the various borders, they say, where are you going? Nigeria? Okay, just keep moving. Comes here and then, of course, deposit the arms, collects the money, goes away. Whatever havoc happens in Nigeria isn't the person's business. Next shipment comes on, whether it's with drugs or whether it's with all kinds of things. And the police themselves also have this frustration. Because there's supposed to be a committee of inspectors general of police in the West African sub-region. And it turns out that unless Nigeria lifts a finger, that committee is in a coma. In a state of coma. So you just keep asking yourself, why are we having this lingering implementation issue? If it's not going to work, then a country must take responsibility for itself and its citizens.
Now, Kingsley, you now understand why I was sort of humbly insisting that there must be a review of the protocol that we are talking about. Let me give you a little statistics that will perhaps illustrate what I'm going to talk about and my response to your question. On March 4th, precisely, 2020, ECOWAS had a conference on this subject matter of small arms and light weapons in the whole of West Africa. It held here on this soil in Abuja. And that was in collaboration with an organization called the Conflict Armament Research, CAR. Now, one of the reports that came up revealed very mind-boggling statistics. For Nigeria alone, in the hands of state actors, that means the law enforcement agencies collectively put together, we have 586,600 firearms. Take a look at that. 586,600 firearms. But in the hands of non-state actors that ordinarily should have nothing to do with arms, we have 6,145,000 firearms. Can you do the mathematics?
So the law enforcement agents have 10%.
Just 10% of what?
Of what non-state actors possess.
Shouldn't that be a worry to a country?
And
I was thinking that at that point, the Nigerian government ought to have raised the flag and say, look, come on. Can we sit down, gentlemen, and look at this protocol? Now, the other side of the statistics is that 91.7 of these 6,145,000 firearms come from within West African region.
Local production.
Do they pass through customs?
So, where are we? What are we talking about? Now, the second thing that I need to bring here on this table is the subject of national interest versus supranationality of our laws. As a student of international law and economics, I have come to study the ECOWAS protocols, the ECOWAS treaty, and all ancillary laws. They are supposed to be supranational in their design, wherein national member states are supposed to donate part of their sovereignty to that supranationality. And then the commitment, therefore, to implement stricto sensu, as it were. However, and unfortunately, sadly, regrettably, what we see is that it is only national interests that are implemented anytime, any day, and no one raises a flag. And my worry is about Nigeria. That you occupy a seat, ECOWAS, for instance, the commission is domiciled here in Nigeria. Number two, Nigeria occupies almost 2/3 of the population of the entire ECOWAS. Number three, Nigeria pays almost about 61% of the community levy. Number four, Nigeria has almost 60% of the industrial capacity that ought to attract the economic benefits. Yet, Nigeria has over 83% of the problematics accentuated by the treaty and the protocols. Let me drive a little bit more. Where then is our national economic intelligence? I thought that it would have been very important for somebody in government, presently in government, to have been on this particular discussion. A minister, for that matter, ought to have been here to let Nigerians hear what the government is doing. I am not criticizing government, but I think there ought to have been a point where collaboration, coordination ought to have taken a better part of us. And why am I saying that? In the sense that there are a lot of opportunities that we have missed, and a lot of opportunities are also staring at our face, even as we speak. So my brother Ejime talked about the AFCFTA. That was an opportunity for Nigerian government to have said, oh, gentlemen, before we head into the 1st of January implementation of the AFCFTA, can we please sit back and review what we have done at the regional economic community levels? Why? Because Article 5 of the AFCFTA provides that the regional economic communities ought to be and shall be the building blocks for the AFCFTA implementation. Can we therefore ensure that something, this AFCFTA is standing on something, because nothing stands on nothing. That's an opportunity.
Was it taken?
And that was not done. I wrote a memo on this particular, subject matter. The second aspect is that I have been here severally when we talked about the border closure that Nigeria had. I gave thumbs up for that. But I also thought that, some of the recommendations that we made here, and by the way, I think that the NTA has been doing a very wonderful job for this country. And I hope that somebody is somewhere penning down all of the recommendations that have been coming up here for national development. And if I were in government, I would have stationed somebody to be doing that. It will help us. All of this, every time we call for conferences and all of that, and then at the end of the day, it becomes like jamboree. Things that are coming out from here are weighty and very strong that can move us. The reason why I talked about national intelligence, economic intelligence for that matter, is that we are lacking in that direction. You know what? I give you an instance of Ghana. I'm just finishing a book on, I'm sorry to say this here, but I just took Ghana from what I have discovered in my movements and in my engagement with ECOWAS. And I captioned it, The 10 Sins of Saint Ghana. You are a saint, yet you are a sinner. The 10 Sins of Saint Ghana. If I were Ghanaian, I would have been proud of their government. You know why? They have serious economic intelligence. Many of the terrible things that are happening in West Africa, I'm sorry to say this, come from Ghana. And yet they are sent. Many of the abnormal practices coming from that end. Many of the lopsided implementation of the protocols from that end. And you see that they are very unique in appearance, to the point that the Twitters of this world today are locating to that place. To the point that companies that are leaving Nigeria are moving to that place. They are saint, they are holy, and they know how to manage that holiness. But what are we doing? Economic intelligence is lacking entirely here. That we don't understand who your enemies are. Not enemies that will shoot at you, but enemies that will remove the carpet from underneath. And you are taking your tea with them at every moment, but there is something happening at the back door.
I think, Dr. Kenukoa, there used to be an economic intelligence unit.
That's right.
This was some years ago, but whether that label still attaches to it, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, well, there used to be, but it's the issues that you have raised are quite pertinent. They're quite pertinent, and we're getting pressed for time. Unfortunately, that's Jumai. Yes. Let's get the benefit also from Paul Ejime. Paul Ejime, again, there are a number of issues on the table, but it has to do with implementation. And if, as you said, the ECOWAS treaty itself is having issues with the faithful adherence to the articles, and the protocols are also having issues, and the major one, of course, has to do with implementation. Well, what should a nation at the receiving end of the ill effects of the lack of implementation do to protect itself, to protect its citizens, and ultimately to protect its interests, such as Nigeria?
Well, I didn't get that part of implementation. Well, how should it come? It comes with the policy makers, those, the policy, those who are making the policies, they finish, they hand it over to those.
Hello? Hello, yes, Paul, I can hear you. Can you hear me as well? My question,
Yes, okay.
my question has to do with, yes, a good number of members of the West African economic community are not faithful to the articles of the treaty or of the protocol. We have implementation challenges. But there still has to be national responsibility along the lines of national interest. And I'm saying that for us in Nigeria, that is and has been at the receiving end of the ill effects of the lack of faithful implementation of the ECOWAS treaty and protocols. What should we do as a people, as an entity? I'm sure because you are far away in the UK, maybe you do not get to hear about reports of all kinds of criminalities, kinds of things that we never used to hear about, and the kinds of tension and anxieties that people are having in Nigeria today. What should we do?
Yeah, well, Kingsley, let me correct you. I'm visiting. I'm just coming back. I've been there. I know what is happening there. So let me tell you, and I will soon be coming back. Yes, the whole of Africa, the world, they are all waiting for Nigeria. Nigeria needs to assert itself. You know, that is the bottom line. We talked about I mentioned the macro, and the micro has to do with the national, what nations should do. Nigeria should up its game, get its act together, and then to lead. I'm telling you, this lack of implementation, by the time Nigeria takes concrete action and tells the people, the body language alone will tell the others that, you know, you cannot but obey. That is what Nigeria hasn't done that. You can also do that through what, carrot and stick, through hard and soft power. It's not all the time. We are not saying go and bully these people, but cultivate them and show by leadership. You know, if you cannot, okay, we mentioned the idea of, I thought we were going to follow on it, about those who are trying to destabilize West Africa. And you know the target? The target is Nigeria. That when Nigeria is destabilized or insecure, there is nothing you can do. You forget about it. Nigeria is virtually ECOWAS. You have how many? 200 out of the about 400 million people. Like you have said, they are contributing about 70%. The market is in Nigeria. So everybody doing whatever Ghana and the others are doing, they are producing. Those who are smuggling, they are trying to bring it to Nigerian market. Nigeria ought to see this, not be in a reactive but a proactive mood, to be able to anticipate the danger, not always reacting. You have to anticipate and then do what, be aware and then take action. The 3 A's, anticipation, awareness, and action. Don't wait until things fall on you before you take action. Nigeria is so reactive. It has to be proactive. Do the needful. But I know there is the deficiency in personnel to man the borders. But can you also get it effective in the areas that you are manning? Can you get your security people to act according to law? Can they, do we have the data to be able to identify those? It's even difficult to pick out Nigerian criminals, let alone the foreigners. These are the issues. Do you expect other countries to do that for you? Or do you expect anybody to come to you? But they do not owe you your well-being. It is Nigeria and Nigerians that will make Nigeria work. The external issues are there. 8 of the 15 countries are Francophone. 2 Lusophone, Portuguese, and only 5 are Anglophone. Now the 5 Anglophone are not even working together. Nigeria and Ghana, they constitute the highest population. They should be working together. They did so in getting a COMOG, getting supplying the troops and leadership that ended the wars in Sierra Leone and Liberia. But they are no longer cooperating. That should be a worry. They should cooperate. Cooperation and partnership is the rule of the game. No country, no matter how powerful, can go it alone. But Nigeria is lacking. Nigeria is missing in action. it has to take its own leadership position very seriously.
Okay,
I think that is what I will contribute there.
Thank you for your contribution, Paul Ejime. Thank you so much. We'll come back now to the studio. Dr. Zakari, with all you've heard from the guests here in the studio, what is the fate of Nigeria if this continues? Briefly, we're running out of time.
Thank you very much. The fate of Nigeria is that Nigeria has been a leader in West Africa, ECOWAS, and Nigeria should take the lead and take it properly. I must say that in implementing some of this, Nigeria political class should be sincere in their approach. There's one thing that we have not discussed in this studio. We must know that some of these arms even despite we have porous border that were not properly demarcated. Of course, that is not that we inherited these borders from the colonial masters. However, some of the political class get these arms illegally and share it to their party member in order to suppress the opposition. And eventually, when these arms get to the hand of, people that are not supposed to hold the arm, it becomes very difficult to retrieve this arm from them. Therefore, there should be a sincere effort for a political class to do away with some of these things in order for Nigeria to properly implement this. All that we have been discussing is that, yes, we must be sincere in implementing this protocol. Why? Because the consequence of it now, we are seeing it. Ambassador link this insecurity with drug abuse. So to say, in the country today, even in Abuja here, just go to the street, you get all kinds of drugs, simply because we have not been able to manage this properly. Everybody is compromising. The political class is compromising. The implementers, the government agencies that are supposed to take responsibility, they are compromising. All agencies that are supposed to put their arms, they are supposed to put their hands together in order to curtail these excesses. They are compromising. Okay, but we must remind ourselves that the consequence effect of this, if we did not take proper position today, will consume all of us. Okay,
Dr. Zakari, thank you so much. Now, we have a number of tweets that came in. We'll just take just a few and round off the program. Daily Jack Solomon tweets, there's a need to institutionalize mechanism for proper implementation and adequate training of security agencies to curb subversions and machinery for proper checking and detection of fraudulent travel documents so as to ensure protocol on free movement to serve its purpose of integration in the West African sub-region.
Festus Akimboyewa, with the current ECOWAS free movement protocol, there's no way we can effectively control our borders. I don't think we have any idea how many ECOWAS nationals are in Nigeria at any time and what they are doing. Since there's nothing we can do to stop free movement, time to exit.
And Mike Anyako tweets, the ECOWAS protocol on free movement, though a well-thought idea, has not lived up to expectations. It is doing more harm than good in view of influx of bandits and proliferation of firearms in the country. If there are going to be any reforms in this aspect, it must be taken.
All right, Steve Bondo 07. Free movement does not mean that the country should accept illegals without documentation.
Boss Dynamic, the question should be directed to government officials. As for the citizens, there are no benefit because all contraband items are being imported to the country.
Law Alpha say the protocol has done us more harm than good here in Nigeria. No thanks to the influx of arms and ammunition engendering a spate of criminality and general insecurity. All right, so these are the tweets that we can take. We'd like to thank you for sending your tweets and to appreciate our four guests who have been with us in the course of this conversation. Here in the Abuja studios, Dr. Zakari Momo of the Department of International Relations at Bayes University in Abuja. Thank you for being here. Dr. Ken Ukoha, President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. Always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria. Ambassador Dauda Adanladi, Nigeria's former High Commissioner to Pakistan. Pleasure having you on Good Morning Nigeria as always. From the UK, we're joined via Zoom by Paul Ejime, an international affairs expert. I hope you're enjoying your holidays and wish you safe journey back home. Paul, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kingsley, and thank you, everyone.
Okay. All right, so that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. The program is back tomorrow, same time, 7 in the morning. Until then, you take care of yourself. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Juma Yusuf. Do have a great day.